Hey guys, Kristy Rice here, author and artist of the Painterly Days series, the world's first coloring book for adults that's made for watercolor exclusively. Just giving you a peek today at the cover of the Woodland book. Wanted to show the spine because it's actually the opposite of the spine here because it actually protects the books, and that's a detail not a lot of people realize when just looking at the books online. Just going to open it up here. There are other YouTube videos on my channel, guys, that show you a lot of the details about the book and go into more depth, but why not? Going to flip through here twice. You can see all the different artwork from evergreens to berries and lots of leaves, thistle, woodland creatures, acorns. It's in here, guys. Toadstools, feathers and ferns, all sorts of things. So the pages are big in size, 9 by 12. They are not designed necessarily to be painted in one sitting because I think that could be a little overwhelming. You can paint them piece by piece. And there are my painting tips, inspirational writings on how to stay creative. So lots in there. We're going to get going here soon on a little painting demo. Love the foil on the cover. I cannot talk about the foil enough. So this is what I'm going to work on today. First, I'm going to show you the brush that I love so much. Talked about it before. It is recommended in the book. It is the Royal and Langnickel. I hope I can get this sharp enough for you. Royal and Langnickel Majestic Dagger 1/4 inch dagger brush. And what I mean by dagger, if you can see there, it is a flat wide brush about 1/4 inch in width, but it also has a beautiful flat side that makes a gorgeous point. So I'm going to get started here. I am speeding this up a bit, guys, so we're not watching this forever. I want to show you some of my favorite techniques. I will say they're for beginners, but guys, these are just tried and true techniques that I used year after year after year. They're my go-to. I love them. They're easy to learn and really fun to implement into your own work and get creative with. So what I did here is I just laid down clean color, very clean color with just a little bit of water on the page. And what I mean by clean color is that I didn't mix anything on the palette. I just pulled the color right from the palette. And because the page, the area was wet first, those leaves were wet first, I'm getting this really cool explosion when I add in touches of paint. One of my biggest tips for beginners and for seasoned artists alike, but more so for beginners, is to not put a ton of pressure on your watercolor paper by using your brush. Watercolor paper is not meant to be scrubbed and pushed and pushed and scrubbed and scrubbed. It is meant to be touched with a graceful hand, with a light hand. Now, this is my opinion. This is my approach to painting. Someone out there may disagree, and I totally respect that. But I feel really strongly that when you're touching the page, adding water to the page like I just did here, dropping in color into the wet water that you just applied onto that bloom, you're just ever so slightly touching the paper. You're not pushing that color around with force. Here, I'm actually pulling up some of the color that I laid down by taking a clean dry brush. And as you can see, when I go off screen, I'm rinsing my brush. And when I come back on, I'm usually blotting it so it's nice and clean and dry. And then I'm scooping up the color that I laid down. 2 reasons you might want to scoop up some color. You may have just put way too much down, or you may have too much, you feel like you have too much water on the paper. But whatever you do, whether it's adding just a beautiful brushstroke to a bloom, a petal, or if you're scooping up color, guys, don't scrub your paper. It's a classic technique that some people use that really puts a lot of stress on the paper. And it also just prohibits the color from really just flowing. I mean, look there, I just dropped in that beautiful opera pink from Daniel Smith. And if I scrubbed that in, guys, I'm going to lose all of that beautiful explosion of color that you get with watercolor. We all know, why are we drawn to watercolor? We're drawn to watercolor because of those beautiful explosions and those gorgeous little veiny things that happen when water touches pigment. So if you're continually scrubbing your page, you're going to lose all of that beautiful magic that happens. So here I am again. I'm just adding a pretty little purple already on my palette, real dusty purple, and I'm going to drop in the Opera Rose. Look at that. And boom, those little explosions start to happen. And you know what? I'm going to walk away. And here we go. I'm zooming in, just showing you another technique where I just put a little color down straight from the palette without putting water on the page first. Dropped in some line work here and there in those leaves, guys, without putting water down first. And then when I go off the page there, I'm picking up water and putting it onto that green so it blends. I'm doing the same technique with the yellow, putting down yellow right from the palette, no water on the page first, and then softening it with a clean, slightly wet brush. I'm going to continue that here. Notice no water on the page first. So all my little explosions are going to be more subtle, and I'm going to get that nice soft shading that so many of you love, myself included. So here I am lifting, clean dry brush, lifting, blotting, and I'm going to take some of that color out into the next leaf. I'm adding a little bit of dark brush stroke on the edge there, and then softening it with a clean, slightly wet brush. And that's the technique I'm using all through here. I did not put color down. I did not put water down first. I put color down first and then cleaned my brush, kept it slightly wet, went back in over top of that color I laid down to soften everything until I was happy. So that gives you less of the explosive watercolor look, and it gives you more crispness and contrast. So here, wet color, very wet color, and then I'm dropping in the Opera Pink again, adding more water back into the wet area. And you guys, you probably see me do that a lot. Why in the world would you drop clean water onto an area that already has a good amount of water on it? I do that to just blend everything and just make everything kind of smush together beautifully. And it's a great technique. Here, I'm adding color and then bringing in clean brush that's slightly wet and fading out that pink color towards the center of this little wildflower bloom. Great technique. So again, adding color just to the tips, cleaning my brush, and then pulling down some of that color with the wet, clean brush to smooth and blend everything. So again, just some really great, simple techniques that I use a lot. And the thing about these techniques, guys, that I love so much is that they're uncomplicated. Because guys, don't we want to just sit down and just paint and not worry about rules, not worry about how someone else is necessarily doing it all the time? Don't we want to have just simple go-to techniques that we can adapt to our own style? Yeah, because that's what this is about. That's what these coloring books for watercolor are about. They're about just sitting down and having fun. They're not about rules. So I am here to give you simple techniques. I'm doing this technique again here with adding a little bit of color on the edge, straight from the palette, adding water on top of it so that I can blend, but remember, not a lot of pressure on the brush. Again, going back to my point, though, I want to give you guys really accessible, easy techniques so you can sit down for 5 minutes, even 10 minutes, and just create something you're really proud of. So I'm not going to give you a ton of rules. I'm not going to give you a ton of theory. I could, but I won't, because I want you to sit down and paint something that makes you happy. And I don't want you to have to sit down for an hour to do it. I want you to be able to sit down for 5 minutes and paint something that makes you happy. That's what I am all about. So going back to the techniques here, guys, I am going to add in a little bit of red down here on this bloom straight from the palette. It's a dry page I'm adding to now. So I added the red, then I added some water, and then I floated in some yellow. Floating in, that's just another way of saying I dropped some yellow from my brush onto the wet page. A little bit of pink, I'm gonna let it go. This is pure color right from the palette, no water on the page first. Now I'm adding water again to soften and spread and smooth. Some areas I'm not adding as much water back in the second time I touch the page because I want it to stay more bold and crisp. Right there is a good example of that, not adding a lot of water back in. But remember, water is like the ultimate smoothing agent. Let's call it that, the smoothing agent. It's the ultimate way. If you're working on an area, maybe you've scrubbed it a little too hard, maybe you've added a few too many colors, and you just feel like that area is stressed. One thing you could do before you just walk away and leave it be is to drop in a little clean water right into what you've been working on. And you watch closely, that clean water will go in there and it'll just level everything out. It'll smooth everything out. But the trick is to walk away. Walk away at that point. So here again, taking color directly from the palette, adding a little red outline. Then I dropped in some really wet yellow and some pink. I'm going into the leaves here. A little bit of water first. I did put a little water down first. Now I'm taking color and spreading it from the darkest, most intense leaf that I just laid down color onto, and I'm spreading it around. This is another amazing technique that gives you a light to dark range on one particular element that you're painting. So again, I started with good intense color there in the upper leaf, kept it wet, and was able then with a wet brush to pull that color around into other parts of the leaf. I love that technique. I'm going to do the same thing here with the pink. I'm just pulling color around with clean water and a little bit of pigment on the page. And remember guys, this watercolor paper is not professional. We do not have the budget to print these books on professional watercolor paper, but it is good watercolor paper. And the reason I know that and stand behind it is because it stays wet for a good while. So you can lay down color like I just did there and on my pink leaves. Yes, they are pink leaves. And you can then wait a little bit and spread it around with a wet brush and be confident that it's not going to dry in a hard edge that you're not going to be happy with. So as I go back in here, adding some simple details into the leaves with just pure color, not a lot of water, which is a great technique for contrast, I just want to review with you some of the techniques we've used. So lay down clean water first into an area, drop in some color with your brush and let it float and explode onto the page. You can also go in with a little bit of color and water on your brush, not onto a wet area, and put in that color, put it down, and then move it around with a clean, slightly wet brush. You can go into a wet area with a lot of pigment on a somewhat dry brush, outline areas, clean your brush, and then go back in and smooth with just a slightly wet brush. So guys, these are some techniques that you can build on and have fun with. There is no tried and true way to be successful in these books except to realize that you do not have to follow rules. These techniques that I'm showing you are not about rules, but they're about making sure that you can feel successful with these books. So I wanted to give you 3 or 4 techniques that you can rely on, that you can count on, that you can come back to day after day and know that you're going to be able to sit down and that precious 5 or 10 minutes that you've given to your page in Painterly Days will be used well, and at the end of it, you will be proud of what you've painted. And that's why I'm here today. And I hope you enjoy this. Guys, go back and watch this over a couple of times to pick up on those tips.